Thank you for tuning in to Talk with Taylor, episode number 6. We got a great episode for you today. I'm really excited to have this conversation and discuss this topic because this is something that I've been doing a lot of recently, and I wanted to kind of dive deeper into it because I know I'm not the only one that experiences this, and I think this can really maybe reassure other people that are going through similar tough times and so on. So I wanted to kind of dive deeper into the topic of having hard conversations with people. I think too many people nowadays kind of tiptoe around the answers, and everybody's kind of scared to say how they feel or have those hard conversations, whether it's with an employee, it's with a family member, it's with a boss or somebody, right? Maybe you have these things you want to bring up or you discuss, but you know it's going to be a hard conversation, and maybe there's going to be some pushback or argument or emotion, and to just power through and get through those conversations, because on the other side of those hard conversations is growth and nothing but good things. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. But thank you again for tuning in. This really means a lot to me. I know I'm only on episode 6 so far. I'm going to keep this going as long as I can, just sharing my struggles, my successes, my journey of being a business owner, my journey of, entrepreneurship, everything else that I'm doing. I wanted to document this, and this is why I'm doing this. And so thank you again for tuning in. So subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and leave a review if you're listening to, say, on Apple Podcasts, because that means a lot. Spread it, share the word. It really means a lot. And if you don't, that's okay. You could just listen in. I appreciate even just one person listening. So again, thanks again. So let's dive straight into it. Having difficult conversations or having hard conversations and what that means to me, how I've dealt with it, and my kind of journey through it all. I've had a lot of hard conversations throughout my life. I've never really been in business all my life. Honestly, in the early days, I never really wanted to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. That was not something that was in my path or my goals, right? My goal was to be a drummer in a band and travel the country. There was no real difficult conversations. I mean, I'm sure there would have been in bands and dealing with bandmates and stuff like that, but I never really had to go through that other than maybe working my minimum wage jobs, and I had to talk to my boss about a raise or getting time off or whatever. But I did have to have hard conversations as soon as I started to date, and when I dated my wife, and then when I got married, I was like, oh shoot, my wife and I, there are hard conversations that I have to bring up sometimes, even between us two, right? And that was hard to address without maybe offending her or coming off wrong or nervous to see how she'd react, or what if she doesn't agree with me. So there was a lot of those hard conversations between me personally in that sense. And then of course, as I joined the family business, then the whole hard conversation world opened up a lot for me. But before I get into the business side of it, I kind of want to address the personal side and the family side and how that was hard for me. There were a few things when I was dating my wife that came up and about that we had to have some hard conversations, right? Whether it was where we're going to live, how we're going to raise our family. A big thing was the difficult situation we had between my family and her family. In the beginning, it was great. Then it kind of turned into this shit show, so to speak. But sorry for my language here, but it got really ugly. So we had to have some hard conversations, whether it was, supporting my wife through this thing or whether or not to support my parents. Obviously, that's not really a question, because I wasn't questioning who to support here. Obviously, I was going to go for my wife and help her and support her no matter what. But we had to have those hard conversations, and we had to have those hard conversations with my wife and I and my parents, because we didn't get along. And there was some weird tension between my wife and I and my parents. And so we had to have those hard conversations, right? And then later down the road, my parents were struggling with addiction, and we had to have more hard conversations there about, hey, I don't want you around my children while you're struggling with this. I don't want them around that. And what came of that, right? Of the upsetness, the anger, the disappointment, right? That came with me telling my parents this and distancing myself from a relationship with my parents because it was just not healthy. And that was a really hard conversation. But what I will say with that, and I won't dive too deep into that because it's a little personal, but I will say that we've been struggling with it still to this day. But through those hard conversations, it was really uncomfortable to sit down and tell my parents that. It was really uncomfortable to talk to my wife about this. It was really uncomfortable. But after all of that, and after everything I did there, we saw nothing but relief afterwards. It was hard in the moment, but then there were on the other side, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy, and it's still not easy, but in that moment after that conversation, we felt some relief because we were honest with them and we told them how we felt and we set some boundaries, right? So I think having those hard conversations, even though you have that pit stomach in your, you have that pit feeling in your stomach and you don't want to have those conversations, it's really, really hard. I promise you, once you have those hard conversations, trust me, I've done plenty of them now. Once you have those hard conversations, on the other side of it, you feel really good because you feel like you were honest. You told them exactly how you felt and how you think it should be handled. Maybe whether it's, you wanted to make sure it was handled differently or things are needed to change in different environments, right? But once you have those hard conversations and get it over with, I will say this, 9 times out of 10, the situation ends up better than what you had in mind. I always went into a conversation assuming in my head it's going to go way worse than it actually was. I assumed it was going to turn into this big thing, and oh my gosh, we're going to argue, we're going to fight, we're going to cry. It's going to be this huge blown up thing. But normally it didn't turn out that way. There were times that were like that, but for the most part, I made it way worse in my head than it actually was. So the anticipation of doing it was way worse than actually just having the conversation. And if you don't have those conversations, what ends up happening is you build up resentment, anger, frustration, stress, everything and above, right? And so just having those hard conversations and doing it and getting it over with is the best thing for you. So now that I kind of got through that with my personal life, and where I kind of struggled with that, with the relationship with my family and my wife's family and my wife, those conversations had to have been had and they were done. And on the other side was good. Maybe on the outside looking in, maybe it's not good, but for us personally, it was really good. It really helped us, heal through this process, getting out there and explaining how we truly feel about it. In the professional space, man, this is where majority of my hard conversations have come up, and this is where majority of the wins and the feelings of success and all of the above felt. So because I work with family, like I said in one of the previous episodes, it's hard working with family. There's always that gray area, or there's fine lines where, you have to tiptoe around certain things, or maybe you don't want to offend somebody, or you're saying, hey, this isn't personally, I love you as my wife, but professionally, as we work together in a business, we need to have this hard conversation because maybe you're slacking here, or you're not doing your job here, or whatever it is. There was always that balance of like, this, again, like I've said in the past, it's my work hat versus my husband hat versus my whatever it is. So there was a lot of that dancing around and tiptoeing around certain things. But however, what I found as I was tiptoeing around and doing all this, again, I was building resentment. I was building anger and frustration. And that's not fair because I didn't allow, say, my in-laws a chance. I didn't give them a chance to respond. And maybe they were going to respond really well, and maybe they were going to listen to me and be like, man, that was a really great idea. Or maybe not. Maybe they'd say, no, that's a dumb idea. You're not doing this, or whatever, right? But without giving them that chance to respond, that's not fair. So all you're doing when you avoid these hard conversations, and when there's a hard conversation needing to be done because you're really frustrated, and like I said, that resentment starts to build, and you're just kind of like angry, and maybe you're ready to quit. I've been there before. I was ready to just walk away because I didn't want to have those hard conversations, and I didn't think it was going to go well. But again, I didn't give them that opportunity to respond. So if you're having these hard conversations, or you want to have these hard conversations, just get them done and let them respond. Now, if they respond poorly, then you can react to that response and you can make the decision afterwards what you're going to do. But until you have that conversation and know what the outcome is, there's no point to building up this frustration and anger, right? And so I'm talking here purely in this situation, like with family, right? It's personal, but it's also like a business thing. And I'm talking about the business side now. There was a lot of that as I grow in this family agency, was like, I want to implement this, but I know they're probably going to say no. So I didn't say it, but then I'm mad at them for not even like, oh my gosh, I want to do this, but they don't even know that I want to do that. But I don't want to have this hard conversation because I know they're probably going to shut it down. And so I was kind of going back and forth with this, right? And then 9 times out of 10, I'd sit them down, I'd gut through that feeling of a hard conversation, And it ended up being great. They were like, you know what? You're right. You should implement that. That's a great idea. I think this will be great for the agency. And I walked away like, oh my gosh, I made this so much worse in my head, right? And so having those hard conversations, especially with family, is hard. But business and professional life, whether it's your boss or your employees, having hard conversations maybe with an employee or a coworker of yours, and say you're not even a business owner, maybe you're just a coworker, and one of your other coworkers is pissing you off, or they're making fun of you or doing something, and to have that hard conversation, to pull them aside and be like, hey, I don't appreciate when you do that. Those are hard conversations to have because not a lot of people want to be honest and upfront and blunt about that stuff. But I promise you, when you have those conversations, like I said, most of the time it's going to end up better. And if it doesn't, then hey, maybe this place isn't for me. Maybe I shouldn't be working here or whatever it is. So I have had many of those conversations with my in-laws, whether it was implementing new things, wanting a promotion, wanting a raise, I'm struggling with my pay, whatever it was. Those conversations were always hard to have because not only are they family, they're my boss, or they're the owners of the agency, so I have to approach them as like my boss. And so it was always a fine line. And I will say we just had one recently, and it was a really hard conversation to have because not only is it family, I'm trying to tell them that where we're lacking is in a department where my family works. And so I had to have that conversation with them and say, hey, I don't think this is working out. And the hard part about saying that is I'm telling them about their job. And how do I do this without offending them or making them feel upset or feeling like I'm ganging up on them or I want to push them out sooner than they're ready to leave, right? And so there were so many balancing, juggling parts to it. But as soon as we had the conversation, everybody was in agreement and we all figured out, I found a solution. Everybody agreed and we went with it. And so what I'm trying to get at here is I don't want to keep rambling here and pounding with the same thing. But once I had the conversation, everybody was in agreement. I felt so much better of like, oh my gosh, I was honest. I had a great idea, which I thought was a great idea, but I thought they were going to hate it. And they ended up agreeing with me and they liked the idea and they appreciated that I brought it up and I found a solution, right? I brought a problem to the table and I found a solution and we discussed it. So with all this being said, I know a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it too, is avoiding those hard conversations. And all that does is eat you alive inside. And all that does is add more toxicity to the workplace. So if I let an employee get away with certain things because I don't want to avoid that hard conversation, because I don't want to tell them that they're doing something wrong, or I don't want to tell them that the way they're acting is inappropriate because I'm afraid that they're going to quit, or I'm afraid they're going to get really upset. And I want to avoid these hard conversations because nobody wants to have those. All that's going to do is keep that person's going to keep doing what they're doing because there's no repercussions. There's no consequences there. And so if you're avoiding that, all that's going to do is upset the rest of your team, because if I'm letting that person get away with that kind of behaviors, then who am I as a leader then? Like, Taylor, you're letting this happen? What in the world, right? And so, again, if you're running a team or you're leading a team, you have to nip that in the bud in the beginning and have to show the team, hey, I'm serious about this. Obviously there's a certain time and place for certain kind of personalities or goofing off or whatever it is, but there's certain times that we don't get to we can't do that. And if you have a good, strong team that's smart and you have one person that's doing this kind of work or doing this kind of stuff and you're not correcting it or having that hard conversation, it's showing to the rest of the team that's really good that you're not a good leader because you're letting this happen and they're all taking this very seriously and that other person's distracting them or making things worse, right? So as a leader's perspective, you don't really show yourself as a good leader unless you have these hard conversations from time to time, right? Hopefully you don't have to have a lot of them, but you are going to run into them. There's always going to be a time. And when you're a family, if you don't have those hard conversations, there's going to be no boundaries. And with no boundaries, trust me, I've been there. It's really, really difficult, especially when you're newly married with kids and you're just kind of building your family and there's no boundaries and your parents are all up in your business. You got to have those hard conversations with your parents, right? And then if you're a coworker, Don't tolerate the coworker next to you that's pissing you off or making you feel bad or whatever it is. Have that hard conversation with them. Pull them aside. Hey, I don't appreciate this. Or else your work environment's going to get really, really bad. And you're going to hate your job. And then you're going to quit even though you liked your job. You just didn't like the person you worked with, right? And so, or maybe you didn't want to have the hard conversation with your boss and say, hey, I don't like my coworker, whatever it is. So you want to make sure, again, all of this stems to avoiding hard conversations. Again, I think nowadays, everybody avoids anything that's hard. Not even just hard conversations. I think people avoid anything that's hard. Running's hard. Exercising's hard. Eating healthy is hard. So you see a lot of obese people. Working is hard. So a lot of people don't make a lot of money and they complain because they don't have money and they're poor. But if you just worked a little harder, you found a better job, or you made a more effort, you could do it. I promise. I've done it, right? And so there's opportunities there, but things are hard. So I could go down a whole rabbit hole of just doing hard things, right? And I know a lot of people right now, I've seen a few of my friends and peers posting stuff about doing hard things and why that's really good for you. Personally, for me, I like to do the hard things first. I like to get it out of the way. First thing in the morning, I'll do the hardest task I have to do for that day. And I know everything after that is easy. Working out in the morning. If I work out, that's probably the hardest thing I'm going to do. Lifting the heavy weights, running, doing the exercising. That's hard. So anything I have to do after that, it's easy. So with all this being said, I'm going to dial it back again because I kind of went on a rant there. Having hard conversations is really important to life. No matter if you're a business owner, a leader, etc. You could be just a husband or a son or a grandson or a son-in-law that works for a job. And you have to have a hard conversation with your family, your boss, your coworker, etc. And I assure you, once you have those conversations and you're confident in yourself and you're able to have those conversations, it's going to be better for the long haul. And even if the outcome's bad, then you can respond to that bad outcome and fix it, right? If the boss responds poorly, you quit and you find a better job. But if you're sitting in that seat and you're sulking and it's killing you inside, that's helping nobody in this situation. The boss doesn't know you're struggling. You're miserable, but you're content with where you're miserable. There's so many things there. So have those hard conversations and just get them over with, because I promise you, let me say this, not 9 times out of 10, 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 times, it's going to be better. Maybe even 9 out of 10. It's going to be better than what you're imagining in your head. Right? And sometimes it's not going to be better than what you imagined, but that's okay too. You deal with it as it comes. And I assure you that every bad conversation that I've had, every hard conversation that I've had has led me to a better position. I had a hard conversation one time with my in-laws that I was feeling underappreciated, and I was doing a lot of work for not a lot of pay and not a lot of I wasn't feeling appreciated. I was doing a lot of the bulk of the agency work and I was just getting paid minimally. This is nothing against them. They were compensating me well. I felt like I needed more. I sulked, I built the resentment, and I was ready to quit. I was ready to just quit and be like, you know what, I'll go do something else. But I didn't even let them get a chance to respond to that. And so when I did, I said, hey, Clark, can I talk to you? I'm struggling with this, and this is how I feel. And you know what he did? He came back with a whole new pay structure and a whole new plan. And hey, now we're going to talk about buying the agency in 3 years, right? We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. That opened up those doors. I had to have some friends tell me I have to have those hard conversations. I told a few peers of mine that are in the insurance industry, I'm ready to quit. And they're like, have you talked about this, this, and this with them? You have to have those conversations. And I was like, I don't want to. I don't want them to feel like I'm entitled or I'm a brat or I'm trying to just get more for nothing or whatever it is. And he's like, you're not, but you have to explain your feelings and let them respond. I had to have that. After I had that first hard conversation, we set up a buy and sell, or me buying the agency, right? Boom. All of a sudden now I'm more of a leader. They were paying me a little more. Now I got a succession plan of me taking over. Boom. That hard conversation just really, really helped me be in a better spot. Now I like my job again. I'm happy. I'm good. The next conversation comes up. Hey, I'm really upset about this, this, and this. I don't like how this person is acting, and I really want to fire them. And I know she's a good employee, but I'm not happy. That was a hard conversation. Hey, you're right, Taylor. You know what? Yeah, you're right. Let's talk about this. We talked about it. We fired her. Things have been good since, right? Everything I've done that's involved a hard conversation pushed me and has propelled me to a better position at where I'm at now. And all that's doing is strengthening me to be a better leader and to be a better owner. Because every hard conversation I have, it gets a little bit easier. They're never going to be easy, I don't think. And I've talked to many business owners that have done this much longer than I have. And they go, it never really is easy, right? Firing somebody's never easy. Having those difficult conversations where you have to reprimand somebody or give them consequences or whatever, never gets easy, but it gets a little bit easier as you go. And so the more and more of these conversations I have, the more and more confident I feel, the more and more bold I feel, the more and more value I feel like I'm providing. And so all I'm saying is if you avoid these conversations, you're doing nothing for yourself. You're doing nothing for the person you need to have that conversation with, because that could be the conversation that changes everything. That could be the conversation that changes their life, your life, and everything else. And I've had it happen, right? And there are some hard conversations that I've had that hasn't changed anything, like my parents. I've had some very hard conversations with my parents, and it's gotten nowhere other than feeling like I've done everything I can to try to help that situation. So now I get to walk away and just focus on myself, right? But there are those hard conversations that propel you to a new level or to a new league, right? And so I'm just saying all this from experience. I know there's many, many situations out there that are completely different than mine. I'm just sharing my experiences here about why I think why having those hard conversations is really beneficial. Because as working in a family business, you have to have a lot of these hard conversations because you're juggling that family dynamic and the business dynamic. And there's so much there that you got to walk on this fine line. With family, when you're married, you got to have those hard conversations. When you have maybe parents that are struggling or they're not appropriate or whatever it is, you have to have hard conversation. You got to create those boundaries. That's a very hard conversation to have. So yeah, that's just kind of all my opinions here on having these tough conversations or just doing anything hard. Everything that I've done that is hard to do or it challenges me, it only makes me stronger. It makes me smarter. It makes me wiser. It launches me to a new level and everything above. So if you don't take away anything from this, just take away this one thing. If you're feeling this way right now, think about it right now. Let's just stop and think. If you're struggling with something, whether it's professionally, personally, etc., think about why you're struggling in that thing. Is it somebody in your life, whether it's in your job, your personal life? Is it somebody or something they're doing? Do you think that hard conversation that you could have with them, being honest, sharing your feelings, sharing why you're struggling with whatever that is, do you think that would resolve your problem? Or do you think that if you shared that and let them respond to your struggle or your feelings or however you want to approach this, do you think that they could respond well and that could resolve a lot of what you're struggling with? I bet it probably could. You're assuming it's going to go bad, but if they respond well, maybe you could, get to a better place with them or your boss or whatever you're struggling with. Because I assure you that most times when you're struggling with depression or anxiety or something like that, I have found normally it's because I need to have a hard conversation with someone, whether it's a family member, a coworker, something. And 9 times out of 10, when I have those conversations with that person, we clear the air and I feel so much better. So I challenge you, right? I do. I think if you are struggling with something, really look deep into that. Is it somebody? Is it something that I could address? And yes, it's going to be a hard conversation to have. But if I have that conversation and there's a chance that we clear the air, will things get better? I guarantee it. And I will tell you, not always it's going to clear the air. And not always it's going to end well. I've had many friends say they've had hard conversations and it went bad. But then what you can do is respond to that and say, okay, you're not willing to hear me out and work with me. I'm going to remove myself from this situation and I'm going to go elsewhere and I'm going to be happy over here. Because it's not worth your time to feel this way. It's not worth staying in a place and feeling miserable. If your boss doesn't listen to you because you had a hard conversation with him and you're not happy and you want a raise and this happens and he says, hell no, get out of my office, then maybe you quit and maybe you go find a new job and maybe you'll be much happier over here with the boss that's really nice and he's going to value you and he's going to pour into you and he's going to train you more, right? There's always going to be those situations. So that's all I got for you today. And I hope this helped. And I hope this was a good one. I'm certainly more passionate. I feel fired up about this one today. I feel really good about this episode because this is such a big thing for me. I have grown so much mentally, physically, everything from having hard conversations. Doesn't matter in all areas of my life. And all I am doing now is teaching my kids the exact same things. You be honest, you share your feelings, and you have those conversations. Even though you're nervous or scared to do it, do it. Because, and I tell them, come tell me. If you're scared or nervous to tell me something, always come tell me that I am a safe place for you. But have those conversations. If somebody's bullying you at school, talk to them. Talk to a teacher. Do something. Have those hard conversations because you're always going to see a win there. There's always going to be a benefit no matter what. You're going to either move elsewhere and go find a new job because the conversation went bad, or they're going to see where you're coming from and you guys are going to work it out and things are better. It's always going to be a thing. So anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you liked it. Thank you again for watching. If you got this far, kudos, man. Thank you for listening to my rants. Again, I promise you I'm going to have some people on the podcast. I want to have an episode with a few of my family members. I want to have a podcast with some of my team members here at the office. And I'm going to bring some outside people on because I think that, yes, me talking, I know you don't want to just hear me talk all day. I think if I have some conversations with other people about certain topics like this, they could bring in some really good value there. So I am working on getting some other people on the podcast and kind of figuring out how that's going to look. So keep an eye out for that, and keep listening. I'm going to do this still every week. I'm trying to do little ones throughout the week as well. I haven't quite to do that yet because my schedule's been a little busy, but I do want to do some little things throughout the week on top of these longer episodes every Wednesday. So again, thank you guys. I appreciate you all. You guys are amazing. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your week.